In this demo, we refine our knowledge on the differences between raster and vector graphics and learn how the pen tool functions in Photoshop. We also cover the nuances between shapes, paths, and pixels, and when to use each of these for the best effect and to save time. Before we jump into working with vector shapes and vector paths, we need to have a clear basis of knowledge on the difference between raster and vector images and graphics. Raster images, which are also called bitmap images, are based on a grid of dots called pixels. Each pixel is assigned a specific location and color value. To better understand this concept, it could be useful to remember that all digital cameras capture and convert images to pixels. In this example of a logo that is rasterized to create bitmap art, we see the pixel gradations in shade and color. Bitmap images require you to edit groups of pixels rather than objects or shapes. A disadvantage of this is that because of the fixed number of pixels, images can suffer image degradation by losing detail when enlarged beyond their original resolution. On the other hand, vector graphics are made up of lines and curves defined by mathematical objects called vectors. Vectors can be infinitely resized and not lose their image quality. They retain their crispness when they are moved, resized, or have their color changed. Vector graphics are suitable for illustrations, type, and graphics, such as logos that may be scaled to different sizes. In this image, which is also included in the text, you can see the difference in a logo that's drawn as vector art and then the same logo that's been rasterized into bitmap art. And the key takeaway is that vector retains its crispness, whereas bitmap art is made out of pixels, so there are limitations based on the number of pixels that will dictate how big a particular image can be. In Photoshop, the outline of a vector shape is called a path. A path is a curved or straight line segment you draw using the pen tool or the freeform pen tool or the curvature pen tool or a shape tool. The pen tool draws paths with the greatest precision, and the shape tool can draw rectangles, ellipses, and other shape paths. And the freeform pen tool draws paths as if you were drawing with a pencil on paper. Paths can be open or closed, and an open path, like a wavy line, has two distinct endpoints. A closed path, such as a circle, is continuous. The type of path you draw affects how it can be selected and adjusted. The path contains no pixels. Because of this, a path will not print if it does not have a fill or a stroke. If you want a path to have a fill or stroke, create it as a shape. A shape is a layer based on vector objects instead of pixels. Unlike a path, you can apply colors and effects to a shape layer. We are beginning our demo by drawing a shape with the pen tool, and we will practice with this practice template that is included in your download files for this week. And even if you are familiar with Illustrator, and I know that many of you are also in Illustrator class, you can fast forward through some of these very simple exercises that we're doing, but I encourage you to pay attention to where the different tool settings are positioned in Photoshop, and then also one of the key functionalities that you'll want to pay attention to is how Photoshop is taking the paths and using them in the raster environment. So even though you might be really familiar or comfortable with using the pen tool in Illustrator, I think this demo is still going to have some important pieces of information for you. Also, when you're, as you progress, you're using the different Adobe products. InDesign has a pen tool, Premiere has a pen tool. The pen tool exists in so many different digital imaging programs, and it's important to understand when to use it in which softwares in order to make the best use of your time and the best, most productive workflow. So having said that, I direct you to page 195 in your text, where there is a detailed description on creating paths, anchor points, corner points, direction lines, as well as using the path selection tool and the direct select tool. And this will be especially useful if you are not familiar with Illustrator and if you have not used a pen tool in the past. Now I'm in Photoshop, and you'll notice that I'm back in my photography workspace. And for our last demo, we were in the web and graphics workspace. Let's take a look under the pen tool. We'll mouse down and see all of our different vector tools that are hiding underneath the pen tool. So here's the freeform pen tool that I mentioned, the curvature, add anchor point, delete anchor point, convert point. We are going to be using the pen tool exclusively for this demo, so you won't have to worry about those other tools living underneath. Also, we have here's our direct selection tool and our path selection tool. I have selected my pen tool, and in the pen tool options panel, let us select the shape tool as our option, and we will look under the tool settings, and we want to make sure that rubber band is not selected. And we want to make sure that auto add delete is selected. We're going to choose from fill. We want to make sure that no color is showing in fill. And for our stroke, we want to take green from our stroke pop-up menu, and we're going to set our stroke size to 4 points. And you can just type 4 PT and tab to apply it. From the stroke options pop-up menu, we'll come down to align and choose the second option down, which is center. And now I'm going to click away to close that menu. In our layers panel, we see the third tab over has paths. We're going to select that and pull it out so that we can keep our eye on it while we're working. And I'm going to position it just underneath my layers. This is so that we can see the paths and the layers at the same time. There we go. With my pen tool selected, I click on point A, which sets an anchor point, and you can see my little blue anchor point right there. Then I click on point B, which sets another anchor point, and you can see that my path automatically connected between the two. And now I press the return key in order to complete the path. Looking over at our layers panel and our paths panel, we can see that I have a new shape layer And I also have a shape path. Now, if my tool, my pen tool, were set to path, then I would not get a shape layer in the layers panel. I would only have a path, and it would not be a shape path. It would just be a plain old vector path. Let's move on to the diagram below the straight line, and we're making a curve this time. We still have the pen tool selected, and you can see these little hollow circles that are not filled in. We will use those to drag our direction lines. And so click on point A, click on point B, but I am not releasing, I'm still mousing down, and I drag my direction point out to the hollow circle and release. Then click and hold on C and drag my direction point out to the hollow circle, and then click and release on the final point D, and then press return to complete the path. And that has created my very nice semicircle. Now that we've drawn our semicircle, let's take a look at these direction points and see how they work. I'm coming down to my direct selection tool, which is the selection tool that is white, is filled in with white. And when I use the direct selection tool and click on the path, you can see that when I click on this segment, the anchor point or the direction line shows up. And when I click on the direction point, the other, it's complementary direction point on the other side, you can see they're linked, right? The other one shows up. Now, if I want to adjust the shape of the path, I can make it longer, I can make it shorter, I can come over to the other side. Now, one thing that is important to know about direction points is that when you drag on a direction point, the segment of the path that is on the same side as the direction point is most affected. Moving on to our S-shaped curve, click makes an anchor point, click and drag makes a smooth anchor point, click and drag creates another smooth anchor point, click, drag, click, drag, and making these smooth anchor points, click, drag, and click and return. Popping back over here to my layers panel, and you can see that for each of the paths that I drew, I have a separate shape layer. And below, if I click on each shape layer, then its corresponding shape path shows up in the paths menu. And this is because these shapes are actually made out of vector, because our paths are vector. So they're fully editable in vector, and they are not containing pixels. So that is the beauty of creating a shape path, because you can fill it with color, you can stroke it, you can apply effects to it in the same way that you can pixel layers, but it's actually made out of vector. Now I'm looking at this S that I made, and my S needs a little bit of help, so let's just see if I can fix it up here a little bit. I'm looking here at this segment. So with my oh, I'm not on the right shape layer. Okay, getting to the right shape layer. Okay, clicking on this segment and dragging this direction point just to round that out a little bit. And let's drag, oh, this is an anchor point, but you can move your anchor points too. You can move your anchor points and your direction points. Let's move this one like this, and we'll pull this out like that. Now, to take, how do you say, make the points not visible, you just click away with the direct select tool any place on your canvas, and then those distracting little blue dots and lines go away and you just see the shape. So that looks much better. I have moved back to my pen tool, and we're going to make a more complex path shape now, and clicking on A. Here's a trick for you. I'm holding down the shift key and I click on B, and that makes the shift key constrains to a 45-degree angle. And still holding down the shift key, I'm clicking on C. Still holding down shift, I click on D. Still holding it down, clicking on E. And now I'm going to release it because I want to make another, what do we call this? Smooth anchor point. There we go. And now I'm clicking and dragging another smooth, okay? And then click. Now shift for 45 degrees, and there we go. Now I'm going back to my direct select tool. Now I'm using my command key to go back to my direct select tool, and oops. Okay. Oh, now I'm getting all here we go. So I'm just smoothing these out a little bit. When I clicked from H back to A, I did not need to press the return key, because since I started, or I ended where I started, that automatically closed the path. So I did not have to push the return key to finish that action. Now we're going to start working on our demo project, and we're creating a postcard for our, what do you call, citrus fruit farm. And this is where we're starting with the start.psd. So let's go ahead and open that in Photoshop. Our start file has this handy dandy path guide in our layers panel, and it's such a nice helper for those of us that are learning the pen tool. If only all files came with a path guide template. Anyway, going back to our pen tool, we're coming up to the options, and this time we're selecting path from the pen tool options. Since we are creating a path and not a shape path, our path that we create will be stored as a temporary path in the paths panel, and we're going to be using the path in order to create a mask. So it's an important distinction to know that it's a little bit like using the quick selection tool, because the path will be there temporarily, but it won't be permanent unless you either save it as a selection or make it into a mask. Here we go with point A. So I'm clicking and dragging to create my direction point, and clicking and dragging again. So you notice how when I pull these around that I can control the shape of my curve. So this one I want to be a little flatter. Don't worry if it's not perfect, because we can come back and finesse it, which we will. And I'll keep going here. I like to make the joke that it's actually not a joke. It is kind of, but there's a reason why I'm a photographer, and it's because I'm not very good at drawing. I did study drawing and painting in my, oops, I forgot to draw. See, this is what happens when I get to talking, all right? I get to talking when I'm working, and okay, let's see what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go to convert point, and now I can drag it. Okay, now I have to go back to my pen tool. All right, I'm gonna quit editorializing here. Okay, now here I want a 45-degree, I want a straight line, so I'm holding down my shift key. Okay, and click and drag, click and drag. And I'm finishing. Now, can you see how my cursor gets this little circle next to the pen tool? That means I'm closing my path. So click, and now I will go back. So there's a funny little bump here. And what I was saying is that I'm not very good at drawing, and that's why I am a photographer anyway. I do know how to use the pen tool. So, and I do use the pen tool. Even as a photographer, I do use the pen tool to make selections from time to time. So, and I'm sure that since you are all graphic designer people, that you use the pen tool quite a bit and are probably more skilled at it than I am. But for those of you who are not an illustrator, this is important, I think, for you to learn how to navigate, because photographers that I know, they sometimes are really afraid of the pen tool, and the pen tool can be your friend, right? The pen tool it's a good tool. So remember, in order to make the blue go away, you just, with the direct select, click away. And now the points, the blue is still there, right? Because it's a path. Look over now to my path panel, and I have my work path. If you want to move the whole path, we can come down to our path selection tool and click, which selects the whole path, and then move it. I don't want to move it. I like it where it is, but in the event that you do want to move it, that is what you would do. For this project, we want to change the color of this orange in the middle to yellow so that it looks like a lemon, so that we can, with the brand of the citrus farm, we can let the audience know that they don't just grow oranges, but that they grow lemons as well. And with the path that we just created, we're going to use this to create a layer mask. The first thing we're going to do is double click our work path, and we're going to call it a lemon. And this is so that we can save it as a path. And now we want to make sure that it's selected in the paths panel, and we're going to load this path as a selection. So we're going to click, and now we get the marching ants. Oh, let's do this. Let's hide our path guide. So that's a little bit better. We don't need that anymore. I'm making sure that my background layer is selected. And I'm coming up to my adjustments panel and I'm selecting the hue saturation tool, which creates a layer mask using the selection that we loaded from our lemon vector path. And under properties panel, let's go to 17 to change to yellow. And as I'm looking at my lemon and I'm evaluating my edges, it's a little too hard, right? So this is the beauty of layers. I'm coming over to adjustments panel. Actually, I'm sorry, I'm going to the properties panel and I want to select the mask. And now on the top, I click the little mask button and I'm clicking selected mask. And this pops up this window that we know from our selection demo. And now I can put some feathering. And I can also shift the edge. So let's drag this in a little bit. I don't know, do I want to drag it in or out? I don't know. I just play around with it a little bit. I can change my view too. I can do it on white. I think that's better. Okay, I'm feathering it. I'm feathering it about 3 pixels, which is usually 3 pixels is about my standard feather. So, and my shifting edge minus 20%. I think that looks good. And I'll say, okay. And yes, I like that. I'll just step back one. Yes, I think that looks much better. Much better. Next, we're adding some type to our postcard, and we want to make sure that your rulers are showing and that the increments are set to inches. And if they aren't, you can do a right click, mouse down, and mine are always set to inches. So we're going to now make sure that we are in our layers panel, that we have the hue saturation layer selected. And we're getting the horizontal type tool. And in the options, we're going to take Arial Bold. Okay, Arial, let's twirl it down. Here's bold. 55 points and a line on the right-hand side. And we want the color to be white. And my favorite way to get white is to just set the background and foreground colors, because, you know, you could do it this way, but if you accidentally get like a little, you know, you might not get pure white. Or you can type in 255, 255, 255, any of those. All of those tricks will get you to white. I'm dragging to create a text box and release. And Citrus Lane Farms is our copy. And I don't want all caps. I did not change that. So let's highlight, and under properties, I'm gonna toggle off the all caps. Okay, that looks good. I'm Gonna put a little bit tighter spacing. So our tracking, -25. I'm grabbing my move tool and I'm repositioning this text so that I like it a little better. We next will add a preset shape to our logo from our shapes panel. And to find the shapes panel, we're going to Window and Shapes. And we've got all kinds of presets that we can choose from. You can explore those on your own, but we're going to flowers and we'll pick the flower at the lower left. And we're gonna drag it onto our layers and it shows up as it's a vector shape. So this is the beautiful thing about shapes. They are created with paths. The bounding box lets us resize or make some transformations. And we want this to be about 1.5 inches tall. So I'm just dragging on the corner and that's pretty good. And I'll drag it into position on the left-hand side. Since I didn't use all caps, it looks kind of big, so I will make it a little bit smaller so that the proportions look good. And I'll commit the transformation. The fill and stroke settings are the same that we used for the shapes we created in our first part of the demo, and we need to make some adjustments there. We'll start by coming over to our layers panel and let's double click this and rename the shape layer as flower and return. And we're going to take a shape tool. Let's come over to our tools panel and we have the 3 dots here. I don't have, here's the custom shape tool. I could pick that, but I was looking for the rectangle and it's not showing. And I have to, in order to access the extra tools, click on mouse down on the edit toolbar and now go to my, looking for my rectangle shape tool. There it is. And drag it over and done. Okay, and now, there we go. Okay, I've got my shape options that are now showing up. And I want to fill, and we're gonna fill with yellow. So I'm twirling down RGB and I'm selecting the yellow and we're going to not stroke. So we'll turn off the stroke and press return. Okay. And now we're going to select, deselect layers. Ah, much better. Now we're ready to roll.